This is Lions on Tap, a weekly look inside the Lions Den. Highlights, interviews, and a look ahead to what's next for the Leos. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski, and Bob the Moj Marjanovic.
Welcome to another edition of BC Lions on Tap on AM 730 and the Lions Audio Network. It's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic. As the man said, along with Matt Baker and Nick Kowalski, we are coming to you tonight from Boston Pizza in Guilford, 100th Avenue and 152nd Street, basically 151st. So if you're in the neighborhood, pop on by. Yash and his staff will take care of you. Lovely Sophia's taking care of us tonight. It's been awesome. And Yash was kind enough, fellas, to bring out this square pizza.
Oh, to die for.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. And a reminder, Boston Pizza, happy hours, 2 to 5. 9 to 5, or probably 9 to close, all day Mondays. Your spot for fundraisers and pub nights. $4 sleeves of house lager during Canuck games. And by the way, $4 sleeves of lager during the Lions Bomber game this Saturday. So if you're looking for a place to catch all the action, Boston Pizza in Guilford is the place. So big shout out to Yash. Of course, we are going to talk about the game that was and the game that is. And our guest tonight, fellas, Manny Rugumbo was supposed to join us. He was unavailable. Rick Campbell was supposed to come by, then he wasn't available. Glenn Suter had to vacuum apparently tonight, so he was unavailable.
Matthew Shinetti was going to fly out.
Yeah, Shinetti.
The weather played a role, couldn't get out. Yeah.
So Farhan Lalji from TSN is stopping by. Farhan, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You
know the best part of this show is that I get to sit next to Kowalski, who's my favorite Penguin. Remember the show, like Madagascar and then the spin-off The Penguins? Kowalski was my favorite Penguin.
See, I get that a lot, and then I get the Killer Kowalski, too, from an older audience.
Oh, yeah, Killer Kowalski from
Penguins is my favorite cartoon, movie, kids show. Like, it's the best thing ever from Penguins.
Man, that's a little before my time. Or Barbie, a little after my time.
Must be after your time, Moj. There's no before your time. Have you not seen Madagascar?
No.
Oh, Moj.
So my daughter's 30, right? I mean, Lucas is still, 15, 16?
Yeah.
17?
First, we saw
that was a good flick. That was good.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of them. T-Mart would call them the Madagascar franchise.
See, like the big franchise for me, like my daughter was Shrek.
And which is what everybody used to call you.
Exactly. So there was a lot of I
think Bertuzzi coined that the first time, right? He called him Shrek.
Yeah,
and we all looked at him and we're like, yeah.
That's not bad.
Mic drop.
Hey, Bertuzzi, I give him that one. No, and all kidding aside, nice to have you on board tonight. I know it's been something that we've been talking about. We finally got you out here. So first off, as we move along, your assessment of what you saw in the 41-31 against Calgary.
So impressive. Like, VA was off the charts good, especially in that first half. I mean, the numbers that he put up, I don't know how you can't get excited watching him. The defense made the adjustments they needed to. Keon Hatcher had a great game, but I'm now believing this team can get it done next week, which I wasn't sure, right, after the last few weeks. But, they've made some adjustments and kind of found some things that I think they can be successful with. But just VA's performance, and you know me, I'm very much a VA guy. And I can't wrap my head around the amount of, VA hate there is out there. And not that there's a lot of it, but there's always those naysayers.
Not hate, but it's VA, but.
Yeah.
There's always a
Just
but.
but.
Yeah, but. And I don't get it, because if you look at his career, especially since 2019, and certainly his 2 years with the Lions, there is so much more good than bad in his game. And the bad is not out of line with any top quarterback in terms of, you take some risks and sometimes it doesn't work out. There is so much more good. And when he plays like that, the entire CFL they should be happy, because this league is dying for elite quarterback play, and VA has it in him to deliver elite quarterback play. And I don't know why there's detractors out there for the guy.
Yeah, and I think a big key for me was the play up front. I mean,
he was clean.
This team lost a couple of games down the stretch, and the common denominator was maybe the offensive line wasn't playing up to the potential it had in the first half of the season. Obviously, that's going to be a very big key once again going outside here on Saturday, right?
Yeah, and I don't know that BC is ever going to try to run the ball, right? Like when we think of winter football and you got to go to Winnipeg and you got to run it, well, you kind of are who you are, and that's not in this team's DNA. You hope they can defend it, but I don't know that all of a sudden you're going to expect Smoke Mizell to get 18 carries and rush for over 100 yards. But what we're seeing in the last couple of games is the book on trying to slow VA down is to bring 3 and 4 and to drop 8 and 9, right? So if BC's offensive line, you look in that Calgary game, and they completely kept him clean, which they didn't do the previous time they played Calgary.
Yeah.
And you look at the Winnipeg game, first half, BC was on fire, and Winnipeg was bringing pressure. In the second half, they dropped 8, they dropped 9. So if BC's offensive line can have the kind of success they did in this game against Calgary, because I think you're going to see similar defensive game plans by Winnipeg that you've seen here, I think they've got a chance. And Kelly Bates and Jordan McSimic made the right adjustments. And the other thing that VA did, which I think is great, and Bob, you'll know this, like, how much does a really dynamic athletic quarterback paralyze a pass rush?
Oh, huge.
Right? Because it just slows you down. You don't want to completely come upfield and create escape lanes. So I think it's going to help him a lot in terms of his own protection because of just how aggressive he was running the football in the last game, which we haven't seen this year.
The other thing, too, when you're playing that zone, and you touched on it, Farhan, the great job that the offensive line did, right? So let's take that one example I'll point out was the fact that, okay, VA drops back. There's nothing there. Nothing. He's looking. The O-line's picked everything up. So what are the backers doing in that instance? They're gaining depth. They keep gaining depth and depth. That's what they're taught to do. The longer the quarterback's in the pocket, you just keep gaining depth. Well, in that one instance on the 1st and 20, they had so much depth, and they said,
then he got 24.
Yeah, and then he got 24 yards off of it, right? So that's one of the things, too, when you're playing that zone. If you can have a very good offensive line that can hold up the pass rush and those linebackers keep gaining depth, there's going to be a huge area there for VA to run. And if you want to play man, well, now you're taking your chances if he breaks contain because everybody's running downfield with receivers. If you want to spy him, well, now you're taking a guy out of coverage. So I think his ability to run is going to be paramount to the success on offense.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how Winnipeg decides to handle it because no one has spied VA this year, right? Like when you play Trey Ford, you spy him. No one has spied VA. Will all of a sudden Adam Big Hill or Kyrie Wilson or one of these guys try to be that spy? And you talk about when he took off, okay, there was the midfield one where he got 24 yards, but think of how good he was in the red zone. And how much that's going to open up. And here's the one thing. Say what you want about the interceptions. VA's the only starting quarterback in this league who has not thrown a red zone interception this year.
21 trips there or whatever it was.
21 touchdowns. 0 picks before the playoffs game. So now all of a sudden you bring the run into it, and it makes him even more dangerous in the red zone.
On the flip side of the ball, too, you got a guy like Josh Woods getting a lot of love after the
Love Josh Woods.
But then you also have, Ben Hladek status is up in the air for Saturday in the West Final. What do you make of the linebacker position right now? You got Bo Lacumbo in the mix, but
I know where you're going on this, and I'm in agreement with you.
Josh Woods is their best linebacker. I truly believe he is, and they are athletic. Like you look at Ben Hladek, and he looks old school, especially with his height and and his hair, and you think he is very athletic, and so is Bo. Bo's always been that guy, but Josh is their best linebacker. And I think for him, not just to be able to fill and be physical against the run, which they need, but all of a sudden, Oliveira is pretty dynamic out of the backfield, and Josh Woods can track him. So I'm excited about him. And I also think the other guy, Ryder Varga, if Ben Hladek isn't playing like we don't think he will, Varga's going to be just fine. You put him in there for 20 plays, he's just fine.
The key for me, and I'm agreeing with you. I mean, we talked to Ryan Phillips, and he was raving about Josh Woods and just how good he is. The thing with Woods, talking to Josh, he's even in college, he's been one of these guys that's been moving all over the place, right? He's played inside, he's played outside. And I asked him, where do you feel most comfortable? He goes, inside. That's where he likes playing. That's where he likes, reading the play from. Because there's a big difference. I mean, you play outside, you attack everything outside in. When you're inside, you're attacking everything inside out. So there's a huge difference in that. But the question for me is, I don't think you lose much with Woods. You might even gain a little, having Woods a little bit more athletic than Hladek at middle linebacker. The question is now, who takes Woods' spot on the outside, right? And can you, maintain what you had with Josh with either Lacumbo or with Ryder Varga?
Yeah, I think you can. And I think when Varga comes in, Josh Woods may push outside, and it might be Hladek that plays inside. So, and you're also seeing those extra packages where they bring in Rugamba and Moget together, and they kind of get them closer to the line of scrimmage. So they've got flexibility, and they've got depth at the linebacker position, especially the Canadian linebacker position that is the envy of the league.
We'll take a quick break. On the other side, more with Farhan Lalji from TSN. Of course, we are coming to you from Boston Pizza in Guilford. A big shout-out to Yash and his staff here in the neighborhood. Pop on by 100th Avenue, 151st Street here in Guilford. You're listening to BC Lions on Tap on AM 730 in the Lions Audio Network.
Now, back to Lions on Tap. Here again is Bob Marjanovic.
This is Lions on Tap on AM 730 in the Lions Audio Network. It's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic, along with Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski from the Lions social media team. Our guest tonight is TSN insider Farhan Lalji. Can I call you insider, play-by-play guy, sideline guy, reporter? What do you want?
Moj's coattail guy.
No, not even close.
Never.
You know what I was thinking of before you got here? We should play a new game. Name drop, place drop. So you name the place that you've been to, and I name a name associated with the place. That'd be a pretty cool thing.
That would be a good game.
It would be a good game, wouldn't it? We'd have a lot of fun. All kidding aside, it is great to have you on board tonight. I know we kind of give you the gears the first segment, but we were talking about the defense prior to the break. One thing too that we should probably take into account: Marcus Moore playing inside, and I think that's going to help the run defense immensely. A little heavier than Woody Barron, and now you put Woody Barron on the outside playing, rush edge. Or rush end, or I should say off the edge. And the thing is with Woody, he's got that speed that, he's fine in that slot, right? And you get a little heavier and a little bigger with Marcus Moore inside.
Yeah, and they need that because when it came to Calgary's run game, it was about stopping the running back. When it comes to Winnipeg's run game, you got to deal with the running back and the offensive line.
Yeah.
So, it's not just about preventing creases and making tackles in the hole. You've got to get off blocks, and you've got to be able to be firm at the line of scrimmage. And their pass rush or their defensive personnel, for the most part this season, hasn't lent itself to that. But now having more in there, and I think he looked good in the last game. So it's good. It's unfortunate for Amir Sadiq, who's really been elevating his game, but Tuhama's the more complete player. So I think this is probably their best setup to try to stop the run on first down.
And, the other thing, too, when you look at this game, and, we had the opportunity to talk to defensive coordinator Ryan Phillips, they cannot allow themselves to get into 2nd and 3s and 2nd and 4s.
Yeah, because the thing with Brady is that first of all, it's amazing how many yards he'll get before contact. But when he gets contact, he's falling forward. He's always going to fight for that extra 2 and 3. We saw it at BC Place a month ago. So they've got to be able to get to him early before he can get downhill.
What about this Lions secondary, Farhan? The second game in Winnipeg, let's be honest, a lot was given up right from the get-go, and the defense did a lot of bending but not as much breaking in the meeting here, the overtime loss. Just how impressed have you been with Gary Peters, TJ Lee, just to name a couple, for the consistency they've had?
Well, Gary especially, right? I mean, I do think he's the best corner in the league, and, I'm glad that the injury when he went knee to knee with Haladic wasn't serious, right? I know he is expected to play this week, but I think he can play with a lot of confidence. And when you're Ryan Phillips and you want to play as much man coverage as you do, you need a guy like that can lock down that boundary side receiver. I'm sure they're going to move Kenny Lawler a lot, especially with their injury situation at receiver. But when he gets matched up, Gary is as equipped as anybody. But I'm curious to see if they do play as much man as they have all season, or if they try to get into some zones so that they can defend that play action a little bit better than maybe they did a month ago. But, when you look at the secondaries in this league, BC's man for man is the best, and I like Toronto's as well because their size and their length. But in terms of overall athleticism and experience, I think you've got to like what BC's has to offer. And I think Adrian Green's been just fine in there as well, and that gives them a nice bit of ratio flexibility. Before
we bring Nick in here in a sec, Dalton Schoen didn't practice today. If he doesn't go, how does Winnipeg adjust to that?
Well, remember, they didn't have him for a lot of the second half because that's where he got hurt, was here in BC, and they still found ways. They'll probably move Drew Olatarski to that spot, and then, I know they just recently signed Markeith Ambles. I don't think he's an option. But the other one, Nick Dembski, didn't practice today.
That's a big
So I would imagine that Dembski finds a way to play. I'd be surprised if Dalton Schoen played. And he is a huge factor for them. He really, really is. So it'll be a lot of moving Lawler around and trying to get him touches from different spots, right? But it'll be a test for BC. But not having Schoen will be a big deal.
I think the big key for BC is discipline on defense, and not necessarily. Yeah, of course we're talking penalties, but my focus when I'm talking about this aspect of discipline is don't get caught up in the noise. And what I mean by that is all that pre-snap motion that they have. Focus on your job, focus on your responsibility, and don't get caught up with a lot of the stuff they're doing in terms of motion.
Yeah, in Winnipeg's offense, going back to Paul Lapolis, who mentored Buck Pierce, is as creative as there is in the league, right? You talk about the motion and eye candy they try to offer a defense to get them looking in the wrong direction, but they also don't run just inside zone like everyone else does.
Yeah.
With BC, like their run game is not complicated, whereas it's all this gap scheme and it's pulling guys and misdirection and wrong way runs and all of these things that are probably a little bit too deep into the weeds to get into, but it's a very different looking run game that you got to defend. So.
Hey, well, we have you before we get to break and Nick Kowalski's world-famous trivia. Eastern Conference, what do you see happening between the Alouettes and the Argonauts?
Toronto. I mean, they've been a model of consistency all year. They don't beat themselves. They played just well enough to win. And, if you're asking me to pick between the quarterbacks, I think it's pretty one-sided. I think there's 3 elite quarterbacks remaining in the playoffs, and Montreal has the other one.
The only concern I have with Toronto is they haven't played a meaningful game in a long, long time.
Fair concern. Concern.
That's the only
but they're just better
Yeah.
in every phase. And their offensive line is probably better than Winnipeg's. It's the best in the league.
Mm-hmm. One matchup I look at with this Winnipeg-BC game is you look at BC's receivers versus Winnipeg's defensive backs. And if you're an average fan and you're looking at this depth chart, you see Crombie, Holm, Parker, not really household names in the CFL, but in these past games, it really hasn't translated to that major BC advantage. Why do you think that's the case? Is that just BC or Winnipeg kind of being underrated in that aspect?
It's Winnipeg's defensive line. If you look at the defenses between Calgary and Winnipeg, and Winnipeg's secondary is better, but not significantly better. They do find a way to generate turnovers. We know Demario Houston's numbers in that regard. I take Calgary's linebackers, and I hate saying that because we all love Adam Bighill, but just as a tandem, right? Like they're so good and athletic, but that Winnipeg D-line is game-changing, and it's not just Willie Jefferson on sacks, it's Willie Jefferson knocking balls down, right? When you have a smaller quarterback like Vernon, that's tough, and they line Willie up inside. Sometimes they twist him inside, and Richie Hall is pretty smart with how he plays those guys. So I think the D-line sometimes mitigates that advantage BC's receivers have.
Everybody will talk about Willie Jefferson, but I think the engine that drives that D-line is Jackson Jeffcoat.
Yeah, maybe, but he's been old. He's been banged up. But we talked about this earlier. I think the one thing with Jackson Jeffcoat is when he plays, the rest of them play better, right? And they've got some newness on the inside as well in terms of their rotation. But Jefferson's production has been better when Jeffcoat's been in the lineup, even if Jeffcoat himself hasn't had tremendous production. So there is a value to that, no doubt.
All right, we'll take a break on the other side. Nick Kowalski's world-famous trivia. People are waiting this.
I am not good at trivia, Moj.
Well, you got to do better than when we had Suter that time.
Yeah,
sure.
Suter was.
He was.
All right. From Port Cook, Quitlam to Paris, people are waiting for this. Nick Kowalski's trivia is coming up next. You're listening to BC Lions on Tap on AM 730 and the Lions Audio Network.
Now, back to Lions on Tap. Here again is Bob Marjanovic.
This is BC Lions on Tap on AM 730 and the Lions Audio Network. It's the Moj, Bob Marjanovic, along with Matt Baker, Nick Kowalski from the Lions social media team. Farhan Lalji from TSN is our guest tonight. We're coming to you from Boston Pizza in Guildford. A big shout out to Yash and his staff here. Thank you to Sophia for looking after us tonight. Just a reminder, $4 lagers during the Lions-Bombers game on Saturday, right here at Boston Pizza, 100 and 152nd in Guildford. They have happy hour 2 to 5 and 9 to close all day Mondays. And they're your spot for fundraisers and pub nights. $4 sleeves of house lager, by the way, during Canuck games. How about those Canucks? Hey, very quickly before we wrap things up and get to trivia, it's really cool this weekend between the Lions, the Whitecaps, and the Canucks. Just the synergy that we saw between the three organizations trying to work together and kind of promote and support one another. I mean, you saw the Lions and Vernon Adams in the offensive line at a Canuck game recently, and they were on the big screen. And I know, Bake, you were there, and then some of the Canucks showing up at the Whitecap game. Some of the Lions wearing Whitecaps jerseys and Canucks jerseys.
Canucks guys were at the Whitecap game too, I believe. Yeah,
that's what I just said.
Yeah.
You're like Julio. You don't listen to what I say. Yeah. The point being made was it was pretty cool. And Farhan, you've been around this market a long time. So have I. That's the first time I've kind of really seen that type of synergy.
Yeah, and I think we had a bit of it before, like when Berkey was in charge here. Like he really acknowledged all the other entities, and I think lately, you kind of need Big Brother to set that tone, right? Like you need the Canucks, who are the big dog, to acknowledge the Lions and the Whitecaps. And, even last year they got the Seahawks involved with the season ticket list, right, for Lions insiders for the playoffs. So it was good to see more of that. I hope the organization can build on it. And honestly, kudos, and I know this is a Lions production here, so I'm not just trying to be nice guy, but honestly, it was really impressive, that crowd, because think of the dynamics last year when Nathan was coming back and the Lions were on a roll to get a home playoff game versus this year. They'd lost the last couple games. They didn't have that necessarily the quarterback buzz or what have you, and yet the Dwayne Vanu and the staff and everybody did such a great job working it to get the crowd to where it was last year, and they were totally engaged, right? So, and the Lions haven't given false attendance numbers in a few years now, right? So that 30,100 was a legitimate 30,100, right? So, under Amar and Dwayne, like everything you see is legitimate. They're not telling you how good it is, and it's not. It's actually that good.
All right, let's get to trivia.
Let's do it. We're talking Winnipeg and BC playoff history. So this is the 12th matchup in this franchise's history in the playoffs. Can you guys name me the first time they ever played in the playoffs of the year?
1975.
You're close.
74. I was at the game. Joe Forqueen tipped the ball in the end zone in Empire Stadium. It was a rainy day. I think the Lions won by like 3 points or 4 points. It was 76?
77. You're really close. Can you name the starting quarterback? If you were there, you
probably Jerry Taggy.
Correct. Look at Moj go.
There you go.
I was at the game. I remember this.
He was there.
This I remember. Don't ask me anything about
Sneaking,
2013.
drinks in.
What about
me and my good buddy Steve Goodwin?
What about 1983?
Remember Steve Goodwin?
1983, Roy DeWalt.
Head coach.
I was at that one.
Western final, right?
I was at that one. BC won that game.
Yep.
Before going
88?
on.
85 would be the next matchup.
No, 84 they also
lost.
84 is a loss. 85 is the next win, is what I should say.
Okay, yeah.
85 is the next win. The Lions DB intercepted the game's final play.
85?
Yeah, in 85.
Larry Crawford.
Incorrect.
Keith
Darnell
Gooch.
Clash.
Incorrect.
Keith Gooch. Keith Hinton.
Keep going.
Melvin Bird.
Melvin
There you
Bird.
go.
There you go.
Far
First play of
end,
the game.
there you go.
I was watching it today.
We went through the entire secondary.
Yeah, we
I
went.
know.
You got
Yeah,
it.
Dante Marsh.
Hey,
No.
who's the starting safety?
Starting safety back then. Oh, Nelson Martin.
SFU grad. Thank you.
Wow. This might be a trick question. So 2011 Grey Cup. Who was the Lions' leading receiver in yards?
Kier Johnson.
Wow.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to get some G-Roys, but yeah.
Had the long touchdown in the third quarter.
Yeah, 81 yards. You guys are all correct. 2016, a running back ran for 110
Jeremiah
yards.
Johnson.
Yeah, there you go. I got it right. I'm trying to. This is my last one here.
You're asking the PR guy. Like you should be exempt.
I wrote the Player of the Week release. Probably. No.
Well, how about let's test Moj here.
Okay.
Who scored the last playoff touchdown against Winnipeg for BC? Do you know this question?
For BC.
Last year it was on a kick return. It was wasn't it on a kick return last year?
Touchdown.
Like
Alex
an offensive
Hollins.
touchdown.
Alex Hollins.
Last year, yeah. Okay.
Alex Hollins scored the last touchdown.
Inside
the game, I don't remember.
With like a minute and a half to go.
Joe Forqueen, I remember. This last year, no, it's just a blur.
What did you have for breakfast today, Moj?
Fruit and yogurt, I think.
Of course.
So, there you go. Great job, Nick.
Good job.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That's it. It's funny you bringing up that Joe Forqueen thing. 76. I just remember like it was yesterday.
77.
77.
When was it? When was
the
it?
First big win the Lions had, because all those years in the 70s growing up, they'd always get beat by Saskatchewan and Edmonton and all that, and they finally won a playoff game at home. Then the next week they went to Edmonton, and I think they just got throttled.
My favorite Empire moment was 82 against Edmonton. On a Sunday afternoon, Mervyn Fernandez took a kickoff back for a touchdown, or punt return back for a touchdown to ice that game. And they finally beat the ugly Edmonton Eskimos.
We had Hatcher on the postgame show. We were talking about his totals. 196 yards, 6th best ever in CFL playoff history, but second in Lions history to Mervyn Fernandez, who had two bigs? Do you remember what it was?
265.
265 or something.
In one of those
That was
80s
in the West
Winnipeg.
Final against Winnipeg in 85.
So the funny
and he got hurt, right? Because he didn't play in the Grey Cup.
Ned Armour came in, right?
I threw the question to Keon, and I said, this guy kind of has something in common with you. He played with the Raiders. I go, Mervyn Fernandez had the 260, and I kind of threw it. So, and then after the interview, he was like, he goes, I got to get a couple more balls next week and catch that Hernandez guy. That would be Fernandez there.
Oh,
Keon. So.
Very quick, was it one of those Lions bombers, was it Cal Murphy and Bob Ackles almost came to blows or something?
No, it was Cal Murphy. It was Murphy, and remember he called Eric Tillman a redhead pissant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was like in the early 90s, so... Yeah.
The good old days.
All right, that's a wrap for us tonight. Before we go, speaking of wrap, Farhan, we're going to give you a quick plug. What do you got coming up on TSN? I know obviously you're going to Winnipeg, so quick plug.
I'm going Friday for the game. I've got the insider stuff. I've got coverage this week. I'll do a VA story, I think, on Thursday. And more than anything, I'm just looking forward to having dinner on Friday with you guys.
All right, great stuff.
Where are you taking us?
I don't know.
And Nick and Matt, you guys will have everything covered, BCLions.com, and, of course, BC Lions on X and also on Instagram, right?
YouTube, everything.
I'm not calling it X, no matter what they
Twitter.
say.
Yeah,
I'm calling
Twitter's
it Twitter.
good. Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap for us tonight. Big thank you to Yash and his staff here at Boston Pizza in Guilford. Big thank you, of course, to Farhan Lalji, our guest from TSN, showing up tonight. You know what I'm going to tell you before we get out of here? Do what you got to do, folks. Go for it on 3rd and short. Just do us a favor. Be safe.